With a week to the official start of the Scottish election campaign, the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said she strongly refutes what she called suggestions and insinuations made by the Conservative MP David Davis in the House of Commons yesterday. The former minister used parliamentary privilege to criticise the Scottish Government's handling of allegations against Alex Salmond. Let's get more from our political correspondent Nick Eardley following all of this in Glasgow. Heading up to a potentially tense time here, Nick.
It certainly feels like it, Jane. It's going to be a busy week before the Scottish Parliament breaks up because there is a report due back on whether Nicola Sturgeon broke the ministerial code. There's a committee reporting on the government's botched handling of harassment allegations against Alex Salmond. And the rhetoric here is just really ramping up ahead of the start of that election campaign. We've just had First Minister's questions at Holyrood, where Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader at Holyrood, has been accusing the Scottish Government of a cover-up, of not providing all the documents that it needed to a court and to a committee investigation. We've had Nicola Sturgeon saying the opposition parties are becoming more and more desperate in their attempts to try and smear the government, and accusing some of being in an old boys network with Alex Salmond. So really tense exchanges in Holyrood, and it all points to a pretty tense campaign over the next 7 weeks or so in the run-up to those elections on the 6th of May. And remember, they really matter because the SNP wants a majority at Holyrood to argue for another independence referendum. Unionist parties want to deprive them of that majority to say another referendum shouldn't be happening. So a tense few weeks ahead, but also a really important few days to set up exactly what that election is going to look like.
Nick Eardley, thank you.
The headlines on Reporting Scotland this Thursday lunchtime. Nicola Sturgeon dismisses allegations made by David Davis about the Scottish Government's handling of complaints. Hello, good afternoon. The Scottish Conservatives are calling for someone in government to lose their job over the mishandling of complaints against Alex Salmond. But at question time in the Scottish Parliament, the First Minister accused the Tories of peddling false conspiracy theories. Our political correspondent Kirsten Campbell joins us now from Holyrood. So Kirsten, what was said?
Well, this all relates to claims that were made by the former Conservative Cabinet Minister David Davis in the House of Commons the other night when he raised concerns about the Scottish Government's handling of harassment complaints against Alex Salmond. And here at Holyrood, the Scottish Conservative group leader Ruth Davidson said somebody in the Scottish Government should lose their job over that, whether that's the First Minister, her Chief of Staff or the Permanent Secretary.
We've got the lawyers acting for the Scottish Government furious at making false statements to court because key evidence was withheld even from them. And now it's claimed that the First Minister's own Chief of Staff intervened in this scandal. But we only know this because the evidence wasn't published in the Parliament, but because it was published in another Parliament altogether. The evidence does mount up, as do the Government's excuses, but nothing can excuse the way that the women at the heart of this were failed, nor the taxpayers' money that was wasted.
Now, there was a lot of supportive applause from the SNP benches for the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon as she retaliated, arguing that just because you use parliamentary privilege to say something, that doesn't turn falsehoods into facts.
Having David Davis, a Tory MP, reading out in the House of Commons under the protection of parliamentary privilege his old pal Alex Salmond's conspiracy theories about the sexual harassment allegations against him must be the very epitome of the old boys club. I have to say, holding this government to account is vital, but anyone who chooses to cheer that on should not pretend to have the interests of the women concerned at heart.
Now, the committee investigating the Scottish Government's handling of harassment complaints is meeting this afternoon to finalise its report. We're expecting that to be published early next week. And a separate inquiry, an independent inquiry into whether or not the First Minister has breached the Ministerial Code of Conduct is also due to be published in the next day or so.
Kirsten at Holyrood, thank you.